Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. Throughout April, we're going to be taking a look at different aspects of wearables, and we have a very special guest who's going to be talking to us about wearables in an unexpected field of tech. I'm here today with
Janet Liberman, CTO and co-founder of Dame Products.
So we're going to be talking about wearables today because we're talking about wearables all throughout April on the podcast. And I think a lot of times when people think wearables, they think fitness trackers or smartwatches, but Dame doesn't do that.
No, we do not. I think that one of the things that happens in wearables, and even when people are trying to make new sex toys or update sex toys, is all they do is they take something existing and then they make it smart. They add Bluetooth connectivity and they just take the existing forms, take the existing things you were trying to do, and just sort of slap some newer technology on it, modules they can buy easily. This is not to say that we don't need smartwatches and bracelets that are smart. But one of the things we did at Dame was we tried to look at what new products could we make? What new things could we build that were wearables, but that added new functionality and that used some of the new technologies like 3D printing to help us develop geometries that would be hard to figure out how to develop previously, and use new manufacturing techniques to be able to make things that might have been hard to make previously without necessarily having to make the devices themselves smart.
That's really interesting because when you look at Sextech, you tend to get a lot of people doing really conceptual things, really like academic research on what the future of sex is going to be. Or like you said, you kind of get sometimes people just gluing electronics to dong-shaped plastic.
Yes. So we have two products in the market right now. One is called Eva. And actually, we're on Eva 2 now. We're on our second iteration. And that's a product that tucks into the folds of the labia. It's a vibrator, so it can provide clitoral stimulation during penetration without getting in the way. So it uses the folds of the labia to hold it in place, kind of like a sexy, sexy penny loafer.
A sexy, sexy penny loafer. And this is a little bit challenging because we've got an all-audio format, but it's sort of a smooth teardrop shape with two little floppy bunny ears, folded over bunny ears. That's not a sexy description.
They're not floppy.
No.
They're not floppy. They're bendy. They're covered in silicone, but there's a little plastic skeleton inside. And that plastic part, it gets bent a little bit when it goes in. So that provides some tension to hold it in place, a little bit like a curtain or a shower rod that might use a little bit of tension to hold it in place. Not a lot of tension. It's not like it's a bunch of pressure. It's just that little spring force. Just a small amount of spring force helps it hold in better and get a higher coefficient of friction. Higher friction force by having a higher normal force.
So I'm really interested, what got you started? What got Dame started where you were like, you know what, sex tech and research and wearables, let's do this?
Well, my co-founder and I were both starting sex toy companies when we met. So we both had slightly different, we're two different human beings. We had slightly different reasons for getting into this. For me, I was developing consumer products, consumer electronics as my day-to-day job as a mechanical engineer. And I realized that there was a consumer products and consumer electronics category that I was a consumer of that wasn't being treated like other consumer products categories. Wasn't getting the same type of rigor into its product development. I wasn't getting the same value for my dollar that I would expect from other consumer electronics. And so that made me realize whenever there's a mismatch between the value that you get and the value you would get from a different product category, that means that companies are profiting off of you. And in this case, I think companies in this space, whether intentionally or not, are somewhat profiting off of people's sense of shame. I didn't realize I felt shame around it. But when I really looked at why I didn't expect more out of sex toys, that's what it came from. So it didn't seem like the advances that were happening in ergonomics and technology, in product development, in other categories were being carried over to the sex toy space. And that looked to me like a market opportunity.
That's really exciting. And I think when you talk about features and design and thought that wasn't brought into the sex toy space, you all have done some things that you see very occasionally, but is much more common to see in traditional tech wearables than you would in the sex tech market.
Yeah.
I believe that you all use a biocompatible medical grade silicone.
Yep, we use medical grade silicone, and we make sure to source that through medical device channels rather than the sex toy channels, because companies who mean well can think that they're getting medical grade products and not be getting medical grade products if they're sourcing through the sex toy channel. So that's an interesting little pitfall when you're in a space that has kind of a shady history. So yeah, we use medical grade products. We do a lot of user testing, which is pretty difficult. Our second product I didn't even describe yet is called Fin, and that's a finger vibrator. So it's almost like you took a round piece of clay and you squished your fingers together on that round piece of clay. So you end up with grooves for the fingers and then a little bulb on the bottom. And so that augments touch with vibration.
You've done a lot of explaining these products to people who can't see them before, I think.
Yes. Well, even when people can see them, I still do a lot of explaining these products because they're new. And when you make new things, when I say a smart watch, we can all figure out what that would mean. But if we're making entirely new products, entirely new categories of wearables, you can't just describe it in 2 to 3 words. You need to use a couple more words to get people to understand what you're making and what would be good about it.
And if our listener wanted to keep an eye on these, to look at these while they're listening to us discuss them, where can they see your products?
They can go to www.dameproducts.com, DAME, like the lady equivalent of sir.
Quite. So I'm looking at the Fin right now, and it is very much like you've described. It is very a lump of clay gently squished between your fingers with a sort of band a little bit further up.
Yes, it has an optional tether. And, an example of what comes out of testing. Our first test group was smaller for Fin, so it was balanced for age. And then our overall test pool is younger. So when we do a broader group, it tends to not be balanced for age. So in our first group, the answer on whether or not we should have that tether part is something that wraps around the 2 fingers that are holding the product between them to hold it a little bit more securely. In the age balance group, it looked like people really wanted to have the option of that tether. In the young skewed group, suddenly the tether didn't look that useful. When we looked at the older group within that, looking at 40 plus data, it said that we wanted that it was more towards the tether. So what we sort of realized was that the tether was an accessibility feature. People who were maybe had arthritis or were maybe starting to get some joint pain, they were more likely to want the option of that tether.
I'm absolutely delighted and almost gently baffled to hear that you're doing a wide demographic of user experience test. Well, would you call it user experience testing?
Yeah, user experience testing or
product testing.
We just call them product testing, beta testing, field testing. You can't really develop a product that's going to have that seamless experience of use if you don't test with a lot of people. And so for Eva, we were trying to make that fit most vulvas, which we have succeeded in. It fits most vulvas, but vulvas are very different. And going into it, there's so little scientific research into vulval variety that we had very little information about what might affect vulva shape. And it's not like there are no established categories. No one can describe their vulva. So we really we're going into it pretty blind. We would either have to work with a very limited demographic, the people who are willing to have sex in front of people. And even then, they're probably going to be performative, and they're not going to be having sex the same way they would be having sex if we weren't there.
Yeah.
And if they were in their homes, or we have to go broad and ask people to try to have sex twice with it while they have it over a week, just to have sex however they would be having sex and describe it afterwards. And then you've got some really shaky data. When it works for some people and it doesn't work for others, you have to get a pretty big data set and dig pretty deep before you can figure out why.
It's so exciting to hear someone in this space doing such robust testing. And as soon as you said accessibility, this is an accessibility feature, talking about Sextech's wearables, I think that's one of the most exciting things you could have said to me in this chat.
Well, and quite frankly, Eva is also an accessibility product. If people can't reach down as well, or they can't grip a sex toy, both of them are great for the sort of Frankie and Grace problem that gets brought up to us a bunch. We did it first, but in the TV show Frankie and Grace, or is it Grace and Frankie? I'm sorry.
I've never heard of this. I just assumed I was going to ask, what's the Frankie and Grace problem?
So there's a TV show, and I'm sorry that I cannot remember if it's Grace and Frankie or Frankie and Grace, but I've watched all of it, with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. Their husbands of many years fall in love with each other. And so they're both suddenly single, I believe in their 70s. And in the later seasons, what they're trying to do is they're trying to start up a sex toy company for older women because they can't grip a vibrator for that long, and they realize that vibrators are not designed for people with arthritis. So these days I hear about the Frankie and Grace problem quite a bit. The funny thing is our products are designed to be used by older people, used by people who are differently abled and have different, it doesn't just have to be arthritis. There's a whole range of disabilities that might affect your sex life. So you need a whole range of products that have features like that, kind of hope that you're hitting the right places and hitting the right points for people. Because it's not like everyone who has some sort of accessibility issue has the same issues.
That's such a fantastic point. It's really wonderful to hear that you've come into this space, you've really actively thought about this, and that you've really been putting in the time and the energy to do this kind of testing.
Yeah.
So this is the deadly serious part. They're like, well, it's all about letting people of all different kinds access this material. Mm-hmm. But I'm gonna shift track very slightly and talk about something very, very petty.
Yeah.
I love, you've got a beautiful teal green or pink. Mm-hmm. I love that you've got multiple colors available. And these are still so your products are available in multiple colors that are still biocompatible medical grade silicone.
Oh, yes. Our products each come in 2 colors, although we just obsoleted the second color for Finn. It wasn't performing very well. For some reason, people don't like orange sex toys. We had a coral color before.
Oh, I did have a visceral no thank you deep in my soul when you said that. I was like, no, orange, yes. No.
But, we're trying things out. And we're trying not to do the most obvious bright pink, bright purple.
Black.
Black. Something that happens a lot in our space is a lot of infantilizing or sensationalizing in what they're doing. Like a lot of branding is like all lingerie and high heels and this kind of overt male gaze version of sexy. And just when you think about it, that's not how most sex is had. Like that's a very limited version of sex. It's the most obvious version of sexy, but most sex is had in pajamas, not in lingerie.
Oh, fantastic. If I quote any part of this, I will absolutely quote you on that.
So being pajama sexy or daytime sexy or just accessible to someone when they're not already in kind of a nervous performative space is something that we really are looking for in our colors. And the other thing we try to go for in our colors and our branding is womanly rather than girly. That's another thing that happens a lot when you start talking about sex and when you start making sex toys is you start going for childish things and infantilizing. And you've got these baby blue and it has a butterfly on it and a whole bunch of flowers. And so another thing we try to do is to try to go for a womanly version of feminine. That's even one of the things that we liked about our company name when we were trying to pick a company name was that a lot of things in the space are all L's and V's and this really soft version of feminine. But dame is a really
it's quite strong,
hard, aggressive word. Yeah. But it's still undeniably feminine. It means woman in French,
So what's it been like being the CTO, being a co-founder of someone who does well-researched, accessible sex toys for women, not girls?
I think that a lot of the times I could forget that's what I'm doing and I could just be designing products. But some of the times it's really different. I hear that I'm doing God's work more in this job than I have in any other previous job. I think that a lot of times people expect me to be receiving a lot of backlash in my personal life. Unfortunately, that's just really almost never happens. There's been 1 or 2 people in the past 3.5, 4 years who've just kind of shut the conversation down when they found out what I do. But 2 in that much time is pretty remarkable, I think. And I think it really speaks to the fact that this topic, people think it's taboo and they think they're the only ones who are okay with it. Just almost everyone's okay with it.
Have there been any challenges around working with materials partners or securing funding?
Yeah, for working with materials partners at the beginning of our process, we were really open to manufacturing just about anywhere. I was looking at US manufacturers, Chinese manufacturers, Taiwanese manufacturers, Korean. But a lot of the US manufacturers A, didn't have experience in some of the more complicated processes that are mostly only used for sex toys, and B, were not willing to work with a sex toy company. They'd made decisions
interesting
as brands or as factories that they don't work on adult products. And then when we started talking to companies in China, there was pretty much none of that backlash. Products were products to them. They knew how to do, for example, room temperature vulcanization, which is a silicone manufacturing process that's pretty much only used in sex toys and aerospace.
That is the most unlikely, at least to me, and most glorious thing. It'd be like, please learn this mechanical process. You can build aerospace components or items of love.
Yes. And the funny thing about it is that these days, it's starting to be a little bit more popular for use in medical devices and wearables. So I've had some wearables companies contact me about how to do that. But basically, most electronics can't take high temperatures, and most manufacturing processes are a little bit too fast to actually fully encapsulate something in silicone or a different rubbery material. So EVA is made with RTV molding, which means that it has one unified silicone outer surface. But I couldn't find any US manufacturers who dealt in high quantities who use that process. I mean, you can also use RTV molding for prototyping processes. You know, basically people make the mold out of RTV silicone so that they can make a small number of plastic parts. So we couldn't find vendors in the US who were both okay with our business model and had expertise in what we were trying to do, which I thought was interesting. An interesting reason not to go with US manufacturing would be that they don't actually want you.
Yeah.
And then I would say,
like, turning away business seems very bold.
Yeah.
But it must happen sometimes.
Facebook regularly turns away business. We can't run ads through our company on Facebook or Instagram.
Really? I get some pretty creepy ads on Facebook, so I'm a bit surprised.
I mean, just overall, our advertising options are pretty limited. And at the beginning, you think, well, okay, people are like worried about what kids will see. But the more you look into it, the more you realize that these things used to be advertised broadly. We don't worry. I mean, kids see ads for other things all the time. And kids also see, if they're on the internet, they're seeing pornography, unfortunately. You know, so we've kind of lost the option of completely separating kids from adult material if you're letting them be on the internet.
Targeted advertising.
Yeah, I mean, there's targeting ads. You know whether or not the person looking at it is over 18. And, you know, I think we can advertise on billboards, but we can't advertise on the internet.
Like, I think about 40% of my Facebook ads are for very dubious quality contraceptive apps.
Yeah.
And I hope they're targeting those as well.
Well, I guess the thing is we could advertise on a billboard, but we can't advertise on the internet where you actually know who's looking at it. And we can't advertise some places on the internet, but most places on the internet. There's a lot of restrictions. And that hurts a lot. That makes us, it's one of the things that makes us different from any other wearables company, is that there's some limitations in how we can grow. Another wearables company would be pouring a lot of money into a lot of different ad channels, and we're very limited in it. So we have to grow more through press and things like that. And, you know, you asked about funding before. There's some similar issues there. It's not that we can't get funding. We've had some angel investors, but we've done a lot of our funding through crowdfunding, actually, because it kind of optimizes what's good about our business while minimizing what's harder. The things that are big opportunities for us is it's pretty easy for us to get press, and consumers want our product, and we can easily connect with consumers because we're building this really authentic brand, and we really put the work in to do good product development and to make sure that our marketing matches our audience. But on the other hand, the things that kind of work against us for traditional funding is that we don't have really clear exits. We're female founded, which makes sense for us in this space. That's part of what makes us an authentic brand. But the studies have shown that female founders do not do as well on pitching. Female founders get asked more about the potential downfalls of their business rather than the potential upsides. We're also a hardware company, and we're not a smart hardware company. People like investing in things that they understand, and we're an almost entirely private space. So they can't research sex and find out more about it, because there isn't information about how the companies grow that's publicly available. And then they also, if you've got male investors, they don't necessarily understand the problem the same way that a female investor would. But we connect well with the audience. So, you know, we've got some downsides of it. The other people like investing in the same things they've invested in before. So they like investing in Internet of Things and software as a service. And hardware is harder to do. There's the classic phrase, hardware is hard. There are fewer people investing in hardware. They tend to be dedicated. And then you put all these other layers on it. And it becomes harder and harder to get investment. But again, you can go directly to people and then they hand you money.
So one thing I wanted to touch on, which was really exciting to me while researching Dame, you touched on the fact that your other co-founder, Alex, is also a woman.
Yes.
Looking at your profiles, so you've got a mechanical engineering degree, you've been building products for a long time. Mm-hmm. And Alex's background is in clinical psychology.
Yes.
Focusing on sexuality.
Yeah, she's got her master's degree from Columbia. If you are interested in sex, there are so few careers that seem available to you. So she had been on the sex therapist track when she realized that she was really passionate about sex, but she wasn't passionate about therapy. So she left the program with her master's and then realized that another passion of hers were small businesses. So started working at a small business and figuring out if that was the right path for her. And then it occurred to her that she could start her own thing and could combine these tracks together.
So yeah, looking at both of your backgrounds and both of your profiles, were you two destined to do this? It seems like such a fantastic fit.
It definitely felt a little bit predestined when we met each other. She had been starting to prototype. Eva, the product, was her idea and not mine. So she had been starting to learn how to do CAD modeling and starting to 3D print, but had really been starting to realize the limitations of what she was going to be able to do without any experience in it and starting to get nervous about what was the next steps there. And I was starting to build out a business model and met a friend to talk about sales projections. And he said he felt really bad because he laid down everything I would have to do to me. And he said that he told someone later that I was just turning whiter and whiter the more he was talking. So for both of us, it was pretty scary to go into starting a company by yourself. And so to meet someone with that complementary of a skill set, we were both sort of hitting those kind of turn back now or full speed ahead moments. It was really good timing for us. It was a really good background fit. So we kind of got business married on the first date. At least business engaged. Business married was about a week or two later.
Oh, well, just business engaged. Business date for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
How did you two meet?
We were starting to get mistaken for each other.
Okay.
So I had been starting to go to hardware startup meetups and hearing things like, oh, my friend met you at this event last month, or someone told me, oh, I met your co-founder somewhere. And so about the third time that I had this mistaken identity experience, I said, okay, let me find my doppelganger. There aren't that many young women in their 20s with long brown hair who are attempting to start sex toy companies any given time in Brooklyn.
Not so many, just maybe a dozen.
Maybe like a dozen.
Maybe two.
So you run into each other, you hear about each other. So we met for a breakfast meeting and started feeling each other out. And I think that I had more of an idea behind the brand I wanted to build and kind of knew that I would get the products from talking to people and from figuring out what the problems were. In product development, it's risky to start from thinking that you already know what the answer is. And then from her side, she knew that she wanted this intimacy focus, but she really had this product that she was very excited about. I had this engineering well-made product development process focus, and she had this intimacy and this specific product focus. And so we even had different parts of the business kind of fleshed out at that moment.
Clearly, fate waiting to happen.
Yes.
How long has Dame Products been around?
So that breakfast meeting was in June of 2014. So we're coming up on 4 years here.
So I know that this might be asking a bit too much, or it might be either secret or you're not sure yet yourself. But what's next?
We don't necessarily divulge that information, but what I can say is that we're always working on making our existing products better. We're always taking feedback from those. We're also always working on something new. And if people want to get involved in that process, they can sign up for a mailing list, which is kind of a feeder for our beta tester list, because we send out surveys.
Beta tester?
Yes.
What?
Without beta testers, how would we get to being able to test our products with a diverse pool? We don't necessarily know if couples are gay, straight, trans. What we know is if they're vulva-vulva couples or penis-vulva couples, or, we ask about the genitalia, and that helps us filter out some of the noise and irrelevant data. So we've got to get a variety for that. We have to get a variety for age, height, weight, ethnicity, sometimes things like how experienced they are. If we're working on developing better versions of our existing products, whether or not they've used those existing products before is another variable we have to control for. So there's a lot of variables that we need options in our test pool. So yeah, we need a lot of beta testers, but it's also like a little bit of work to beta test.
I would imagine in one way or another, yes.
People are like, oh no, it'll be so fun to test sex toys. And some people do feel like it's really fun to test sex toys. And some people are like, oh man, this is work.
I have to fill out a form.
You have all the same problems too that are the reasons why you thought you would have sex and then you don't. People get sick. People get busy at work. Someone dies. They get injured. People have gone into surgery while they were supposed to be testing for us. Their partner.
The follow-up emails for that must be very weird.
They are very weird because you're like, I'm so sorry for your loss. Can you send that vibrator back?
Oh.
It's very...
Yes, I'm so sorry. That's both very sobering, and I can imagine trying to type that email and just be like, how do I phrase this?
Yeah. What's the sensitive way of asking the stranger for our prototypes back? Because that's how you are when you have a loss, is you haven't necessarily put things into perspective yet, and they'll be like so apologetic, and you're like, I really don't worry about that vibrator you signed up to do. Get it back to us whenever.
You'd be like, take some time.
There's also been breakups. Breakups are a good one.
Not caused by the beta testing.
Not caused by the beta testing, but just breakups that occur after one partner has said they will beta test. And for testing Eva itself, a lot of those testers were friends of ours because we hadn't built it up yet. We hadn't launched yet. And so a lot of my guy friends would sign up to test.
How awkward.
Without checking with their girlfriends first or checking when their girlfriends' periods were. So I learned a lot more about my guy friends' girlfriend cycles than I necessarily thought I would.
I've just learned a lot more about your guy friends. That seems like a real basic send her a text kind of thing.
Yeah, it does seem like a real basic send her a text kind of thing, but they're excited. They want to help. Didn't occur to them that their girlfriend wouldn't want to fill out a form.
I tend to text before I pick up pizza, so this seems a bit bold to me.
Well, you learn a lot about people's relationships. I think another thing that's really funny is for Finn, because that has so many that's the finger vibrator. It has so many different ways you might try to use it. We had both partners fill it out because some people used it on themselves and some people used it on their partner. And then we had them write down all the different ways that they used it. And couples would not agree about how they used it.
Cool.
So
wait,
one person would say they used it during cunnilingus and the other person would say they used it during PIV sex and the other one, they didn't agree. Or they'd say I enjoyed it because she liked it. And then she says I enjoyed it because he liked it, but it wasn't really my bag. Yeah. So it's interesting to just see people's communication problems. Or, maybe they're not problems, but to see the way that communication breaks down in relationships and in sexual activity right there in front of you, because did they not read each other before they mailed it in?
Not always right there in front of you.
Yeah. You're reading them when you're typing it in, but it's interesting to see how people ended up with different things that stuck out to them, or thought their partner liked it, but they didn't, or thought their partner didn't like it, but they did.
This has been so interesting. I've gotten to learn an incredible amount about sex tech as an industry. I've gotten to learn so much about sort of the challenges of wearables and funding and manufacturing, and also a lot of reinforcement that people are just weird and cool.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so excited about hearing this later.
And just to recap, where can people find you online?
Our website is www.dameproducts.com, DAME, like a lady, sir. And they can find me at Dame_Janet on Twitter.
Thank you again.
Yeah.